welcome. Today we're diving into a hot topic that's reshaping the AI and investment landscape, which is sustainability. Consider this. In 2025, major tech companies such as Amazon, Alphabet, Microsoft, and Meta plan to spend over $300 billion on AI infrastructure. I'm sure you've also heard about the Stargate project and the announcement yesterday of the 109 billion euros by President Macron. So there is indeed a form of an investment race. But as AI is ramping up the numbers, investors are no longer just interested by powerful model or rapid scalability. They're asking, can it stand the test of time? Is it energy efficient? So startups that think ahead are the one catching investors' attention today. In short, sustainable AI isn't just a buzzword, it's a serious competitive advantage. So today we're super lucky to have a great panel with us to break it all down and ask ourselves, why does sustainability matter for funding in detail? What are investors actually looking for? And how can AI startup position themselves to attract the right backing? So today we have Jean-Baptiste Rudelle. Hi, thank you for joining us. He's the president of the Galleon Project, a group of French tech entrepreneurs, and president of the think tank called Xenon Research, focusing on low carbon technology and how they can make the economy more sustainable. We also have Anaïs, hi, sustainability manager at Revaia. You spent a decade before driving growth and innovation in startup across France and internationally. With Vinted, Rocket Internet, Recommerce, and Very Chic. You're in the topics of climate and ESG, so thanks a lot for joining us. Reza, general partner at Partech, a global tech investment firm, headquartered in Paris, but also Berlin, Dakar, Dubai, Nairobi, and San Francisco. Also investor in Upsun, which is powered by Platform.sh. Thanks a lot for joining. And Guillaume, Vice President of Advocacy at Upsun, specializing in carbon footprint optimization for enterprise clients at Platform.sh. Thanks a lot for being here. And myself, I'm Nessrine. I'm the CEO of dotConferences and also hosting .ai conference for tech ecosystem. All right, let's dive in. So first question, maybe for you, Reza. What are the key sustainability metrics that you evaluate when considering startup companies for investment, and especially the AI-focused ones?
Good morning. So thank you for having me. So I think the word sustainability, can be viewed multiple ways, and it's not just about the environment, but it's also about building a business that can actually scale. So I think it matters on both sides, because what we don't want is for people to keep spending $2 to make a dollar, or to hit a wall in what at some point will limit their growth. So we want to be very careful about, is what they're making or building going to make sense in the long run? And if you start using, unlimited compute power, that's not going to scale, because the cost is going to be huge. And of course, the impact on the environment will be big as well. So you really want to look at it, in our view, holistically, to see what is it that they're doing and can it be optimized, as opposed to just going forever. And I think that's pretty critical, because a lot of the messages around ESG tend to only focus on, the environment sustainability, but there's also a business reason for it. So it's not just, some fade out there. And right now, a lot of people I hear say, with Trump in the White House, sustainability is going out the door. And I think it's wrong, because the administrations will come and go in the White House, but there's just a reality of resources we have. And so we want to make sure that people, as they're developing their technology, do realize that there's a limit to how much they can consume. And that limit has to impact the way they develop their technology. So when it comes to pure ESG pieces, carbon emissions are one of the things that we track as a fund. So we do care about that, and we're going to be looking at what the companies are already capable of tracking, or what they would want to be implementing in the future. But very importantly, we want to share the message that this is not just, you know, some fad out there in the market. There's a reality that also impacts their economics.
So you added or you keep following the carbon emission KPI in the investment evaluation, right?
Yes, where it's possible and where it makes sense. As a platform, we invest from seed all the way to growth. Most seed companies can't really do that yet. It's way too early, but we want to work with them to say, look, you're going to have to track this at some point. So what are the things that we can help you with putting in place to do that? And as the companies are more mature, they usually have some sort of tracking, or if not, then again, we'll work with them to do that. But it's something that we as a firm, we have an annual ESG report and we do publish that.
Okay, thanks for this. So maybe now in the other side, for you, Jean-Baptiste, from your experience as both founder and investor, what sustainability-related challenges maybe did you face to meet those KPIs when scaling your companies?
So hi everyone. Yeah, I mean in the startup world, the whole sustainability concept might sound a bit strange compared to a regular company. Because the whole point of a startup is to go in hyper growth, and how can you sustain hyper growth and at the same time being sustainable? There's some kind of mental tension between those two concepts that seems to be pretty much at odds. Typically, my previous startup, before I became an investor, I was at a company called Criteo, and we've been doubling our revenues every year for 7 years in a row. So when you do this, how can you be sustainable at the same time? It's kind of schizophrenic. When you're fairly small, you don't really care. And as Reza was saying, you know, if you at the Series A level, your pure focus is product market fit. Nothing else should matter. But as you start scaling, those things start to become really big friction points. And typically, for instance, one of the key metrics is the cost of infrastructures. As we were doubling the traffic going through our platform, in the early days, we were just doing brute force thing. We were doubling the size of our infrastructure. At that time, we had our own, there were no cloud systems, so we were building our own servers and our own data centers. So we could feel the pain of doubling the size, which is okay when you do 2, 5, 10 million in revenues. When you start to hit 50, 100 million and beyond in revenues, doubling your infrastructure every time you double your traffic makes absolutely no sense. So you have fairly quickly, you have to launch optimization project at the same time than you launch scaling project. So if you want to be sustainable, you need always to have two brains and to run in parallel scalability project with optimization project. So you want to make sure, and a good rule of thumb is when you do 2x in traffic in revenues, hopefully your revenue is correlated to your traffic. Otherwise, that's a different issue. But you want to do 1.5x in terms of infrastructure. And if you do this, you're kind of okay because it means that the two curves are diverging, and you're creating some leverage in the model. So this is something we're very aware, and now as an investor, I look a lot about this ability to optimize as you scale, your ability to optimize the infrastructure, which is absolutely key in terms of sustainability. Because we all want startups to become as big as possible, but with a model that becomes more and more favorable.
All right, so you're thinking about sustainability as a factor to make your scale future-proof, right?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of different ways we could discuss of how you can optimize the platform, but you want to have one or two key metrics, ratios that you follow, and make sure you anticipate this, because the sooner you take sustainability into your technical design in play, the better. Because the later you wait for this, the more painful it becomes to implement this. At some point, the platform was completely stuck when we hit around 100 million in revenues. And we were kind of hitting a ceiling glass, like a lot of companies. And we knew that if we wanted to go to the next level, we had to rebuild from pretty much from scratch the whole platform. So we had what we call our Red Pill project, which is face reality rather than just keep surfing. And in practice, it meant that during 18 months, we didn't ship any new product. We spent, the whole technical team spent 100% of their time rebuilding the platform for better scalability, so we could have a sustainable long-term future. And it's very painful because when you are telling your sales team that there's going to be no new product for 18 months, they all start to scream, obviously. But this was the cost to pay for long-term sustainability. So it's always a trade-off between short-term and long-term. But be careful that if you accumulate too much technical debt in the short term, you are not going to build a sustainable business. So you have to keep this tension in play to ensure your long-term future.
Right. So great lessons here, especially if you're in earlier stages. Thanks, Jean-Baptiste. Anaïs, maybe from being really in the topic of climate and ESG, what are the common misconceptions that you see with companies that you're following about sustainability and also about startups in AI in general?
Sure. Hi. So just a word about Revaia. So we're a growth equity investment firm investing in Europe from Series B onwards, so late stage of VC. And I'm sustainability manager. And so I think for a long time, what happened is that we thought that tech companies and IT in general wasn't part of the problem, where we used to say, it's the industrial companies that are the problem. IT is something, it's a no-brainer. The thing is so we've seen like big tech announcing their net zero pathways, so net zero, so the drop of their emissions down to almost zero. And that was around 2018, 2019. But since then, we've seen that with the emergence of AI, most of them are not able to meet those objectives. So, for example, Microsoft announced that their emissions grew by 50% due to their AI activities. So they're not able to meet their net zero pathway. So we see that now it's becoming a real problem. To give you an idea, so a study conducted in 2019 by the Shift Project showed that IT represented 4% of global emissions. That's almost equal to aviation emissions. So yeah, we know that it can become, and it's projected to grow to 10, 11%. So we know that if we don't do anything now, it can become a huge problem. So there's this growing awareness now that we need to optimize. So I concur with what's been said previously. And I think also the other misconception and a growing awareness is that startups can be also, in AI startups can be part of the solution also. So we've seen a lot of startups working in healthcare, for example. Also companies using AI to optimize the grid, the energy grid. So we see that we can also use this technology for the good, and we with Guillaume and Chausson Partners and Revaia, we released it was 3 days ago a report on AI, the French AI report, where we map these companies that contribute to solving the social and environmental problems.
Thanks a lot. You're actually building a great bridge for Guillaume. We'd love to see some practical examples. Can you maybe discuss specific FinOps or reporting strategies that support both growth and sustainability, and maybe a couple client examples?
Yeah, we've seen that on the infrastructure side, and as JB and Reza mentioned as well, when you're scaling your company, you can't scale your operation the same way. You need to have a different ratio between the two, or you will never be profitable. And when we're talking about sustainability, it's not just about the cost of infrastructure, it's also the human cost to actually operate it and manage it. When you're doubling your data centers and servers, you need more people to handle that, and that's really tricky. So we're always pushing our clients to do two things. When they're just starting like Series A or seeds, yeah, they can throw metal at the problem. It's not ideal, but at the beginning, that's what you have to do. But then whenever you reach a certain size, like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if we're talking people or revenue, but maybe 50 people, 100 people, and maybe 20 million, you need to start optimizing a lot. And that means, as developers, rethink the way the application may work, try to find all the bottlenecks, optimize them. And then, as more, let's say, management layer, trying to optimize all the different costs. So sustainability is, sure, getting that carbon footprint lower, and there are a lot of ways to do that. We're going to get into that after. But it's also optimizing for cost as well, and making sure that the profit you're making makes a lot more sense. So on the FinOps way, that's really interesting because let's say, for example, at Platform.sh, we started having a FinOps team when we were reaching around 40 million in revenue annually. We should have done that way earlier. In just 6 months, the FinOps team reduced by like 40% our cloud bills on AWS and GCP, just removing like stupid stuff we completely forgot about, we were not tracking well. So having one or two really good people tracking all this, mapping all the services, and trying to map them also to profit centers, making sure that we're spending the money at the right place to get some profit out of it is way important. So you need that team from the beginning, whether that's part of finance or product, whatever you want to be, but you need to track those costs. And I know an Amazon Web Services bill can be intimidating at first. It can be like 300 lines, but you need to get into it because there are so many hidden costs there. It's easy to see like CPUs and stuff like this, you see them. But the bandwidth between region, the backups, all of this can go like hidden in the background, but at the end can be like 20 or 25% of your bill. So you need to keep track of that. And you need to be able to report it.
Clear advantage of tracking and thinking about this earlier in earlier stages,
Yeah.
right? Let's get practical. Maybe for Anaïs, another question. What tools do you recommend for early stage companies to assess their sustainability, and how useful maybe are those tools for startup when they should raise their next round?
I think the first step is really to make founders and teams understand that sustainability is not a burden. That's, I think, a good step to reach because as Reza said, like sustainability is not only about like caring about the planet and the society. It's also about making your company future-proof and prepare for the future. So once that first step is reached, what we do is we get companies to, if it's not done, we get them to perform their carbon footprint, because it's super important to know where your emissions are stemming from in order to optimize. So I won't get into like the technical part of optimizing because I think it's already extensively covered. But yeah, so what we do is mainly having them to perform their carbon footprint. Obviously, for those companies that are decarbonizing through their clients, we also get them to measure their avoided emissions. So it means really what they're able to remove as carbon for their clients. And Platform is a good example of a company that is not like an impact or a driven company, but that is able to decarbonize the activities of its clients. So here the IT-related emissions. And also another tool that is very useful is the LCA, the life cycle analysis, because it enables to cover the whole value chain of the environmental impact, because we talk a lot about emissions, carbon emissions, but we need to also ensure that we also optimize for water use, because that's becoming a huge issue in the IT industry, because we use a lot of water to cool the data centers, and also the use of raw materials, because that's also becoming a very critical issue.
Thanks, Anaïs. From those tools, maybe Jean-Baptiste, do you have examples, practical examples of sustainable practice that you've seen recently?
So in AI, I will try to focus on AI because this is the AI summit. Obviously, I mean, startup can optimize on the carbon footprint, but usually, unless you are in the carbon business, it's a very small part of what you can do. It's something relatively marginal. I wouldn't call it complete distraction, but it's. I know there are some ESG reports that are needed for your investors. But if you are in the AI industry, what really matters is the model you built. I've been doing AI for the last 20 years. For a long time, it was called machine learning. In the last 2 years with Gen AI, now the AI term is cool again. And obviously, there's something very specific about AI is the threshold level. It means that you try to have a model that can predict a certain output. And if you are below a certain level of quality, the whole thing is useless. If you are below, let's say, 80% predictability, you can throw the whole thing out of the window. And suddenly it becomes useful as you reach a certain level, which means that you have a very strong incentive to increase the number of parameters into your system, because you have to cross this threshold. Otherwise, your whole system is useless. I mean, some industries, when they do customer support, they need to be at 95% accuracy. Otherwise, it's just unacceptable. So there's always going to be this pressure to increase the computation power, the number of parameters of your system. And you are facing, again, this tension between this and how scalable and sustainable your platform is. So obviously, there are many ways to address this. I mean, we've been through the whole cycle ourselves. You want to do a lot of model compression. There are many tricks to do that, and you can gain a huge factor, even if sometimes you lose a little bit of accuracy. But let's say if you lose 1% accuracy, and at the same time you reduce by a factor of 5 the size of your model, it can be an okay trade-off. So you're always going to have those trade-offs. But sometimes you're going to be surprised that by a minimum perturbance in terms of quality, you can have a huge, sometimes 10x factor in terms of size. And we see this happening today with small models being almost as good as big ones. Another huge factor is your ability to predict peaks of traffic. This is something huge, because if you have to dimension your platform for the very, very day of the year and the very hour of the year where you have maximum traffic, you can suddenly double the size of your whole system for a very little gain. I was in the business of e-commerce, where there is a huge spike of traffic during Black Friday, where a lot of... one way to optimize was to distribute the traffic across many regions, because Black Friday is very concentrated in the US. So if you can distribute your load across the world, you can manage those peaks in a much better way. And then obviously you have things you can do at the data center level also, about the cooling and everything that also increase. So you have to act at every stage of your model to ensure, again, that always keep this rule in mind, that when you do 2x in volume, you need to at the maximum have 1.5x in terms of your resource. And if you keep this ratio in mind, But it requires a lot of discipline to do this. But it's really the key for sustainability.
Right. So we're talking here. We talked about tools, ratio, practical implementations. Now I'd like to go a step further in the practicability of what we're talking about. Let's say someone here is building a pitch deck. Reza, how do you advise them to integrate sustainability into that?
Do you believe pitch decks? I think no. It's not really about the pitch deck. To be quite honest, I want to turn the question around, because a pitch deck is just a snapshot of a story they want to tell at a given time. And I think the more important matter is really for them to incorporate the idea that throwing money at a problem is not the answer. And as much as I love all of our great partners, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they've basically done everything they could to convince startup companies that, don't worry, just put more money, I'll give you more infrastructure, and your problem will be solved. And that doesn't work. And so the idea of starting to think, as Jean-Baptiste said, from the beginning about how you want to look at, optimizing things is very, very critical. We had a company that was developing a CI/CD product on Macs. And for the longest time, their only scalability was, we're just going to consume more Mac minis. Where you're going to hit an issue with that. And so they did what JB said about Criteo. They went back to the drawing board, re-optimized, and massively not only cut their cost, but got the ability to grow the way they wanted. And again, so I think instead of telling them just put something in a pitch deck, and it's like really think about how you're planning to grow. A lot of times when early stage companies come, as JB said, all they're thinking about is, here's the market we're going after, here's how we're going to grow it, and we're raising this much money to go after it. It's like, okay, but what's next? And you want them to start thinking from the beginning about what's next, how they envision the path to world dominance, because it's not going to come just naturally by throwing more money. And I sometimes like to remind them of this example of this thing called the Open Compute Project. So this was over 10 years ago, before there was all this AI craze. But the folks like Facebook actually hit an issue where there was no more enough electricity and water in California to build another data center. So they had no choice, right? It's not that they were thinking about the planet. It's like, okay, how can we optimize our data center? And back then, for some who might remember, they started coming out with designs of servers that had less screws, that had a different heat sink at the front of the server than the back of the server. And they built a data center with no air conditioning, all with ventilation systems. And it wasn't because, honestly, they were thinking about the planet. It was because they had no choice. And they then got into this and released those designs as an open source project. It was called the Open Hardware Project. And I think that shows that even a company with unlimited money back then had no other option than to think about this. So because we invest fairly early stage, we want to tell people, look, if you're successful, you're going to hit the problem. So think about it early on, and be upfront about the way you're thinking about it, and share that in your story. So it can be in your pitch deck, but more generally in the story you're telling about how you're envisioning growth.
So in the story you're telling, you're discussing, you're seeing sustainability as a risk management option, or
it comes to that as well, because imagine you're super successful selling the best croissants in the world, and you're out of flour, right? You're gonna have customers waiting.
Something just want to add, something I've been starting to see in AI startups, which I think very interesting. For me, it's kind of a revolutionary idea. Is this idea of federated learning, where rather than training your model completely centrally in the cloud, you distribute it on the devices of the people you're working with. Both it have some positive implication in terms of privacy. Because you don't have to centralize the data for your learning set. And also you use all those devices, and it's less resource than you use centrally in the cloud. So I'm starting to see some startup exploring this area, which I find it very exciting.
It's we started out technically with the load balancing, and then you're going even further with the risk management in that sense, right?
Yeah, people have to be super creative. This is a very creative way to use your resources that you already have, right? And the other thing, if you look at, Jean-Baptiste said now smaller models are getting to the level of larger ones. And if anything, DeepSeek proved that you don't need to buy the highest, most power-consuming chips to be able to do a good job. So I think putting more brain power and creativity as opposed to just thinking that it's unlimited money is pretty interesting. The last thing we want to do as an investor is just fund NVIDIA's stock market. So.
All right, great conclusion to this part of practicability. Now we're going to focus on to end the session on the future outlook with the growth of AI. Maybe Guillaume, do you have any thoughts on future infrastructure trends that you're seeing supporting sustainable AI?
Yeah, obviously, as you said, a lot of startups are now starting to do systems that's going to optimize others. So we've seen even like with coding agents now, you can get a bit more performance. You can optimize code. You can get best practices a lot more. Junior developers going to do kind of a better job. We'll see how that goes in the next few years about that. But that's going to be interesting. So your application will be a bit more optimized. We'll use less resources to do the same job. That's good. But on the infrastructure side for us, what's most important, it's all about the electricity grid. If you're running the same website in France or in Texas, where I live, well, the consumption of carbon in Texas is like 8 or 10 times more than in France, just because the electricity grid is based out on coal and not nuclear energy or anything like this. And that's the same, as you said, for cooling. All the data centers in Sweden, Quebec, are doing way better in terms of carbon footprint because they're using, well, it's colder, so they're using less SE, bit more natural water and stuff like this. So for us as an infrastructure provider, the goal is to make sure that the workload of our clients are running where the energy is actually the greener one at one point. And it's changing a lot. The electricity grid in France, for example, has really different numbers if you're looking at 7 p.m. or 1 a.m. or during the day or winter versus summer. So our goal, and also including AI machine learning, to actually figure that out, is to be able to say, okay, at that point in time, this workload should run on that region, and that's where we're going to get the more carbon efficient one without impacting the usage and the experience for customers. Because on top of the sustainability efforts, we always consider that anything we change on the infrastructure side can have an impact on your users, on the final user of the website or the app. So we don't want to impact this. We want to limit that. But as JB said, if we can get like maybe a 2% more latency on that user, but gain 40% on the carbon generation, that's a win. So we're going to go for it. So it's going to be more elastic dispatch of those workloads based on the electricity grid and the different providers. I'm just going to close with this. On the providers, we've seen a lot of efforts from the different big hyperscalers, but also some more local clouds and some local companies. So we're also investigating maybe actually going with greener providers that have more optimized data centers and stuff like this. It's crazy the race for building data centers right now. I've got 3 Microsoft data centers popping up like a few kilometers from my house. And they're actually building a nuclear power plant for those data centers because they need 15 megawatts to actually run those data centers. So we need to be careful with that. And that's where even if we're going to pay a bit more, we need to go with actually better option and more sustainable option.
So there's an interesting point of parallelizing the KPIs around electricity consumption and the user to see what are the trade-offs in that. Thanks a lot, Guillaume. Following also Sasha Lucioni papers on the Jevons paradox, which we highly recommend here. Jean-Baptiste, what are your insights on this? Do you think the benefits of using AI for improving sustainability will outweigh the resource consumption?
Okay, so I'm going to have to unpack this one for the audience. The Jevons effect, for everyone who are not familiar with that. It's the idea, very old idea, that when you reduce the cost of something, there is more demand. So it's kind of the rebound effect. which there is absolutely no paradox in that. It's the whole purpose. When you reduce the cost of something, you want to stimulate more demand. And if there is no more demand, if the demand is completely inelastic, there is something weird and something wrong in your product. Because if your product costs less, you should have more demand. And this is what all startup is expecting. So at a startup level, you want this elasticity happening. Now, if you take a step back and look at the whole, I would say, economy level, the macro level, there is this whole fear that, if we invest too much in AI, it's going to kill the climate, it's going to consume a lot of electricity. So yes and no. In a way that, yes, obviously, more AI is going to consume more. And quick win, you want to build your data center in France, where it's a low carbon country. This is something, the most easiest way, even for your cloud provider, because very few, I guess, in the room are building their own data centers, try to demand that the power is coming from France or from the Nordics or from Iceland. In other countries, they are buying sustainability certificate, which is a bit of a greenwashing. I'm not going to go into that. But anyway, if you look at the macro level, again, I've been working on the decarbonization of the economy for a number of years now, and the big takeaway is that it costs a lot of money to decarbonize the economy. Anything we do with carbon machines, if you want to do it with low carbon, it costs more. I mean, you take electric cars compared to regular cars, or everything like that. So we're going to need a lot of money to decarbonize the economy. Where this money is going to come from is going to come from the increase in productivity in the rest of the economy, which hopefully going to come in a large part from AI. AI is a huge win in terms of productivity involvement. So by purely focusing on the consumption of data center for AI, I think we're missing the bigger picture, is that the primary role of AI is to increase the productivity of the economy so we can be richer and decarbonate faster. Because today, the reason why we're not decarbonating fast enough is just because we're not investing enough money into a low carbon alternative. So this is where, when I see Sasha's paper, for those who are interested, you can have a look, focusing too much on purely the cost of data centers. Yes, obviously, we want to optimize, and we've been discussing this, how to optimize your model. But you are building, most people in this room, AI for the greater good, for making the whole economy faster, more efficient, richer, so we can reinvest this money into decarbonization.
Thanks, Jean-Baptiste. So we've talked about curves, we talked about ratios, tools, how to integrate sustainability into a story. I'd love to end this panel with maybe one key takeaway for the audience. If they have to do just one thing, what would that be? Maybe starting with Anaïs.
Yeah, I agree that decarbonization is not going fast enough. That's for sure. And I think what we should always remember is that tons of studies have shown this. It's always less costly to act now than to repair the damages we've done later. I don't know if you've seen a Guardian article last week or 2 weeks ago that showed that so it's a consensus among actuaries that have shown that by 2070, 2090, because of the effects of climate change, so mainly extreme weather events, our global GDP could decrease by 50%. And that's not like hippies showing that. It's really actual actuaries that have shown this. So it's really important to act now for the decarbonization, all the while optimizing our activities, and AI can be one of the solutions for that.
So act now for Anaïs.
Well, I'm just going to add that, AI is more the solution than the problem. And obviously, we want to do it in a smart way. There are some dumb ways. And if you're just throwing brute force capacity, then you're going to hit a wall. But there are so many ways to do AI in a smart way that, let's keep focusing on that. It's my big takeaway.
So I agree with JB, and I think that the same way when cloud technologies took over, people had to rethink entirely how they developed applications and built solutions and did things. I think it's the same major shift happening here. So I think I agree that AI is going to be a big part of the solution, but it's going to force people to rethink how they did things and not take for granted the old ways. So you really have to think outside the box.
Right.
Yeah, and I would say keep being informed, read online research papers, super interesting. I know you already have a job and you have plenty to do. You need to develop your product, do your product for clients. But yeah, keep eyes open to see what's going on, what could be interested, what could be used directly to optimize that, and rely on others. So, all right, I'm not trying to be too salesy there, but if you're not an infrastructure expert, rely on people that know how to do this and already optimize this. And that's the same for all the different things, finance and stuff. There is a huge French ecosystem of startups right now that are doing really great things around sustainability and things. Look at this, talk with them, you're gonna learn a lot, and maybe you can leverage them to actually optimize your own business afterwards.
Okay, so act now, make AI part of the solution, think outside the box, and rely on others. That's it for today. Thanks a lot. We're going to switch to questions now with Elodie from the audience. So feel free to raise your hand if you have questions for our panel today. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Nessrine. Don't be shy. Any questions?
I don't know if you mentioned that because I arrived a little bit late, but there is a solution I find very interesting to lower the impact of resource consumption. Is the idea that a data center is also a heat-producing machine, and you could use this heat for domestic purposes, for example, heating water in buildings. And there is a French company called Carnot, with a Q, which does that. Of course, it's quite far from the cloud vendors. It's more for people who want their own little server. But what do you think about that?
So I've been looking at a number of companies trying to do that. I mean, on the paper, it looks like a super exciting, smart idea. My heater is going to be a calculator at the same time. In reality, the economics, unfortunately, they don't work because. We could go into the details, but it means that your calculating machine is going to work only a very small fraction of the time compared to a data center because you are not heating your house the whole year. It means also that you have a nightmare in terms of maintenance because everything is decentralized compared to a data center, which it's super optimized. So when you look at the economics, and I've been looking at several startups trying to do this, unfortunately today the model doesn't fly. But on the paper, the idea is just super exciting. I agree.
We've seen a few projects like in Sweden where actually the heat produced by the data center, so without being dematerialized and dispatched, is actually sent back to the city and stuff like this. But you need specific conditions, like you need Nordics countries and stuff like this to actually do that. But that's one way to not waste that energy and actually reput that into the system. So I think it's really local initiatives based on what they can do at that point. But as Anaïs mentioned, the big challenge is going to be the water usage. We've seen so many lands dried up right now because of this, and we need to figure something out. So yeah, whatever we can do with that energy is good.
Other question? No?
So how do you see AI improve quantum data center? Because usually we put that, as two technologies, but maybe AI can improve as well the way that this server may work at the same time, those server may help as well, improve how AI, can work. So how can you? I'm especially looking at you.
We know the hyperscalers are already putting like AI monitoring on top of everything they're doing to optimize their own data centers and servers. For us that are using them on top of this, basically something really simple to understand that a server that does nothing still consumes power. And actually, the same way we had the ratio between revenue and cost of infrastructure, we want those servers to run always at more than 90%. They don't consume a lot more energy at 90% than 40%. So our goal for us is to make sure that all the servers we're running are always running max capability. We always obviously have a bit of failover and making sure we have enough space to handle whatever happens. But that's our goal. It's to run the fewer machines we can by packing up all the different processes and workloads for our clients on the one we got, and then scale out of that. And scaling down whenever we need. So for us, it's all about having more intelligent monitoring and prediction. We have a few models running that are analyzing traffic patterns when they're growing, when they're getting down by client, by region, and stuff like this. So the goal is always to map the infrastructure as close as we can to what's actually needed, and to never have resources that are just wasted because we're not actually using them. So. Good luck with that, Reza.
No, here actually it's interesting. I had that conversation with someone yesterday. Today, I don't see an easy combination between the two. For me, quantum is about very, very powerful models that basically break encryption, and AI seems to be something completely different. So honestly, today, I don't see how you combine the two, and there seems to be each going after a very, very different market. So unless there's a magical thing, I don't see a good tight today.
Another question here.
Thank you. You were speaking about the gain of productivities to finance the transformation of our economy into low carbon economy. What if the productivity gains are not there? Because if I read Aceboglu, the new Nobel Prize winner in economy, his studies are not so optimistic, and the global tendency in productivity is going low and lower each year. So, for you, is it really the only hope that we have, or maybe there's other ways?
So, I mean, that's obviously a very interesting debate, and there's been the same debate, 30 years back with the rise of the personal computer, and there was this joke among economists that productivity gains from IT was everywhere except in the numbers, and it took a while, and usually there is a lag between the emergence of a new technology and its translation in terms of productivity gains at a macro level. So it might take a few years. When it comes to AI, my personal bet, but we all have our own different bets, the area where the productivity is going to be the most spectacular in terms of gains short term is going to be in terms of writing code. This is the area I find the most exciting, is automation of coding, and the fact that coding, which up to today is something very painful, you have to hire a whole bunch of people, and managing tech people, we all know that it's kind of difficult. Which is why people buy on the shelf SaaS product, because it's just too painful to build your own customized product. But SaaS is painful also because it's never providing you the right functionality for your very specific business. If you think of a world where writing code, the cost of writing code is going to go to zero, you can suddenly write customized software for your very own needs. And I see a huge area of productivity gain here. There's going to be a lag. It's going to take some time. But it's already happening in the freelance community, where people can handle bigger projects right now with productivity enhancement in terms of coding capability. You want to add?
No, it's good. You're firing all the engineers, basically.
No, I'm empowering them, which is kind of different.
Yeah, I think it's not going to be such a shift in the next few years. There's going to be a huge lag. It's the same when we're talking about automation. Like most of you have like some kind of development background or no developers around. And still in your life, you do a lot of tasks that are not fully automated that you could have automated years ago. So that's going to take time to actually make that part of our daily lives. But then that's going to be introduced in a lot of different ways. Really small things that combine actually get that productivity gain and a lot less tasks to actually do every day. So will that be sufficient to actually, fund the whole anti-climate change thing? I don't know. But for sure, we're going to see a lot of productivity gains in the next few years. And actually more streamlined processes, more control, more, let's say, automated reviews, less human errors that goes unnoticed and stuff like this. So that's going to be interesting to see. I think nobody right now can even imagine what we're going to do 10 years from now with that technology. We're just at the beginning. There was a report, I think it was Gartner last week, that said that 78% of big Fortune 500 companies were actively looking at AI, but only 3% of them have a real AI-powered process in place in production right now. And that number is going to go up in the next few years like crazy. I'm pretty sure we're going to see a few mistakes, a few fun things happening. But we'll see. Maybe one day it's even going to optimize our government. Who knows?
Hi, I'll just take over. Philippe Tegup, nice to meet you. As a CTO and lead developer in my own company, I can fully agree that the newfound power is quite immense. Although I think with scaling complexity, there's also diminishing returns eventually, because more AI code means more bugs, essentially. But my question is a bit related to it, and related to the green technology, green transition. The scaling of code production is very unique because it's actually a load you can transport at light speed. Previous green upgrades required transport to the place when we think globally, which is the reason why France is perfectly green with nuclear energy and renewable power, but the rest of the world is not really there yet. So what advantage do you see to actually transport computational load from developing countries, from the parts of the world that aren't able to just fund nuclear power plants as if there's no tomorrow, to bring them to greener countries, which, at least for now, have a slightly higher costs? So what advantage could those computational data centers have here to attract that load, to attract that business, and therefore also improve our green transition? Thank you.
Actually, if you read between the lines of President Macron's announcement yesterday of $109 billion investment in France, most of it is data centers. And why? Because we have cheap electricity and basically fairly low carbon electricity thanks to nuclear. So in a way, I think there was an Abu Dhabi fund, there's a Canadian fund. What they're doing is they're saying, hey, here we'll have access to probably some sort of subsidized real estate because the local governments are going to help. And then we're going to have cheaper and greener electricity. So it's a much better idea to put our data center here than to recreate it elsewhere. So I think some of that is happening. But I don't think that's going to solve your problem for the long run, because if truly we're going towards more and more requirement for infrastructure, you're not going to fill France with data centers only, right? You're going to need to start having also better electricity options in other places, hopefully.
And I think it's no surprise, but you know that big tech is actually investing massively in nuclear solutions. So, but that's going to take 30 to 40 years before it actually happens. So, yeah.
Wow, a lot of questions.
You said you've seen a company training the model in a decentralized way. How they manage to do this? and what's the direct benefit?
So what is the question again?
You said you've seen a company training their model in a decentralized way.
Yeah. Well, the idea is, if you, let's say you want to identify a picture of cats for your AI model, you can just import millions of pictures of cats on a central cloud, or just ask the permission of users that have pictures of cats on their own phone to run it locally. If you do that, you have several benefits. You avoid this centralization of data, which creates privacy issues on the cloud. Even if every cloud provider is telling you that they are, privacy proof and everything, the reality is a bit more nuanced, let's say. And also, you are using all this distributed power for free, obviously. So it works for a type of training that requires some kind of B2C data. So it doesn't apply to every topic, obviously. But I think that's a very smart and promising way. We always talk about decentralization, and it's been kind of a big motto in the IT world. And the reality is that we are centralizing more and more. We are building bigger and bigger data center, which makes sense because there is complete economy of scales, as we were saying. When we try to have smaller data centers, it's just when you run the economics, it doesn't work as well. And this could be a way to, I would say, go the opposite. Obviously, it doesn't apply to every topic, but to specific topic, I think that's there is sign of life. There's something very promising there. It's still pretty early, but I like very much the idea.
And I was also a bit late, so sorry if this has already been addressed. But there's been a lot of really interesting, but maybe quite vague thoughts about productivity gains, maybe low carbon data centers, and that kind of interesting suggestion. I wonder if there are more specific things that might present actual opportunities for commercial gain from decarbonization. And we're talking about this, and again, there's a sort of sense that by reducing income, we'll get some vague benefits in the future. These might become opportunities in the future. But I wonder if there are particular things that we could, as companies in this sector, building AI products, actually make money from a green transition. And I wonder if an angle on that might be thinking about offsetting, thinking about carbon trading, thinking about monetizing carbon gains. I got the sense from, I think, the gentleman on our left, your right, when you use the term greenwashing, that probably carbon's maybe not at the top of your agenda, but I wonder if there are ways, and I wonder if these are things you might be thinking about as investors in the sector. And I see Microsoft is a huge taker of offsets, and I wonder if there are opportunities there, and would be interested in your thoughts.
I think before even thinking about offsetting, I think if you run a company and you're early stage company, at some point you're going to want to raise funds to scale your company, and investors now make it compulsory to have a climate strategy. It's because of SFDR, but it's also because, venture capital is, the other name for venture capital is risk capital. And as we said before, sustainability is a risk management framework. And so when we do a due diligence on a company, we're going to want to see the sustainability commitments of a company. And if there are absolutely none, we're just not going to invest. Just to give you an idea, Revaia, we conducted IT industry-wide benchmark where we wanted to know according to which stage what are the sustainability commitments and actions in place from the IT startups. And we've seen that from Series C, 87% of the companies have a carbon footprint assessment performed, meaning that they're actually managing their carbon emissions and making it a real topic of optimization. So I think it's becoming, it's not even becoming, it's now really a must for you to have this in mind and really managing it. Then offsetting, it's I think it's another debate. I don't know if we have time for this.
So just to add on this, I mean you've been hitting a very interesting thing, that is there any commercial edge by trying to be low carbon for a startup? And to be completely honest, in the short term, the hard answer, the honest answer is very little. I've been studying the voluntary carbon market for a number of years, and this market is stuck, and really having a lot of issues. The reason is because today the only incentive you have to do this is I would say a PR incentive. There is no value beyond the, I would say, the goodwill people are. So it can give you some brand power when you hire talents. Look, I'm a green company, to your clients also. The reality is that there have been a lot of studies on public companies. Unfortunately, and I say unfortunately, that it has very little impact on the operational performance. This is why you see today a lot of impact investors kind of pulling back from this thesis. What would really address this in the long term would be a carbon tax. If there is a real serious carbon tax, then the businesses will have a real incentive to decarbonize, because they will have an immediate financial benefit. But today, the benefit is very difficult to capitalize on. This is why, even Microsoft, okay, they've been investing, but when you see the carbon footprint is exploding right now, because there's so much value for them to capture in AI, it's a no-brainer for them. It's that they're not going to optimize on their carbon footprint compared to that. The trade-off is very simple for them. So really, this is my personal take, is that only a carbon tax will address this in the long run. And as long as we are purely on a voluntary, mindset, I don't think it's going to go very far.
One question from Ori.
Hi. So I know you've done a lot of work on modelizing the carbon footprint, and that there's a lot of issues with the transparency of the providers, while taking into account embedded, like the cost of the machines. And how much does this change, like in years where you could think that the server lives for 5 years? So how does this embedding element change, and the transparency element change when you're talking about GPU-based workloads?
Thank you, Ori. Love you. I think we're still lacking a lot of transparency. And let me know if I didn't understand the question correctly, but all the data centers right now have what they call PUE ratings, which is basically based on what they take in electricity, the power and the thing they get out, and it's a performance ratio. That lacks a lot of transparency. We don't know what's behind that. We don't know what actually some of the providers do differently than others. So in order to track that, it's really hard. And with all the GPU market getting crazy right now and the new data centers rolling out, it's going to be even worse. So in terms of monitoring, I think we also need a lot more regulations, whether that's European or more global. But we need a lot more transparency from those cloud providers on how they're using all that hardware, what are exactly the performance and the impact of it. Right now, once again, we're just at the beginning. It's a gold rush right now to put as many GPUs in service as you can to actually resell them. I'm pretty sure the first studies and the first number will be really bad. And then it's going to be our job to optimize all that, also with the different cloud providers, to make sure that, once again, that hardware is not going to waste and actually used. So we'll see. Right now, we're lacking transparency from those hyperscalers for obvious reasons, unfortunately.
There are some initiatives that are emerging to assess and give more transparency to this. I'm thinking about a joint initiative from Salesforce and Hugging Face that launched yesterday, the Carbon Index score. So they're measuring the different models. And again, I think we always have to think about the full life cycle analysis, because you want to include the hardware in that score, and that's their goal. But yeah, as you say, it's the beginning, and this needs to be fine-tuned.
I'm really hoping in the next few years, and sorry for NVIDIA's talk, but we really need some competition there with new architectures, ARM, TPUs, NPUs, whatever that could be, but actually bring more types. We're going to see models running on different type of hardware, not really needing GPUs. That's going to bring a lower cost, maybe more efficiency as well. Right now, there is no competition. And that's kind of crazy when you see the funding side of it. When you see like AI companies in France raising 650 million and not being able to buy a single GPU for NVIDIA because OpenAI paid them 10 billions, it's kind of insane. So that market is so saturated right now, and it's so hard to find some hardware, that the technology is going to have to evolve to actually run on other stuff. We'll see. There are a few products right now that are pretty compelling. And that's also going to change how we do that. Right now, the whole NVIDIA model is not sustainable at all in terms of production and stuff like this. And we've talked about a lot about running those things and how much it's consumed to actually run them. But building them is kind of even worse. And it's so complex. But building GPUs right now requires so many materials from all over. And the carbon footprint of building one GPU is just insane. We do this right now because we have no choice. But I really hope in the next few years we're going to have another model in place to try to optimize that someday, maybe. Elodie, you're up for the closing remarks.
Yes. Thank you. So I think today's discussion clearly showed us that sustainability isn't just nice to have, but real competitive advantage. Integrating it at an early stage can definitely make your business stronger and more resilient. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank our esteemed guests today, Anaïs, GB, Reza, not you again, but because you're part of you again, but also our best Upsun team backstage, Letoya, Celeste, Patricia, which is with upstairs, Guillaume, our apprentice here, Digital Village for having us here today, and Nessrine, we had to go, but from our partner dotConferences. So what's next? You can either stay with us here, because we're going to have Robert Vezoul, I don't know where you are, there, who's going to be doing a live demo session. The topic is about open source or commercial AI, what would be the most sustainable choice. So it's going to be here in about 10-15 minutes. You can go upstairs, enjoy a free coffee, croissant, snacks, and have a networking discussion as well. Or you can also join the business track day at Station F, which is 15 minutes walk. And Nessrine, who was here with us, will actually lead that track. What else?
I would recommend going for a coffee and a snack and just got back just for the time to remove the backdrop, and then for Robert's demo afterwards.
And thank you to you for being here with us.
Thanks.
Thank you.